In this video, I'll explore working with local variables inside of Figma, which can be really powerful when you're prototyping. The example that I'll use is adding items to a cart. So when I click on this Add to Cart button, every time I click on that, I'd like to actually indicate on the shopping bag out here, like how many items we have in the cart. And when we actually go to checkout, it'd be nice if for example, price was updated based on the number of items in the cart. So we can do those kinds of things using local variables. I'm going to start by making a duplicate of my shopping bag and turning that into a component inside of Figma. So let me zoom in on this with Shift 2, and that will zoom in, and I'm going to just zoom out just a little bit. I'm going to turn that into a component by clicking on the Create Component option that's there, and then make a variant of that component. And in the variant, I want to edit that. So I'm going to double click into it. And I actually want to get rid of the content in the very center here. So I'm going to select out, oops, not that. I want to select out this sort of center part and get rid of that part of the bag. And instead I want to create, I'll be done with that part. I'm going to actually put a rectangle behind there and fill this with some color. So I'll put in a rectangle and fill it with one of the colors of our scheme. So this gold color I've been using. I'm going to put that gold color underneath so that it fills in. And then what I want to do is actually have a number inside of this as well. So I'm going to have text that's a part of that. And I'll go ahead and put in a number there. And let's see, I want to be able to see that text first of all. So where is it? And then I want to get it to be the right size. It's probably a little bit too big right now, so I'm going to scale it down and then make sure that we can see it. Let's go ahead and move that so that it comes up. And I want a different font for that. I've been using the Montserrat font inside of here, so I'll go ahead and see if I can't find that font style. And there's Montserrat, and I'll make that kind of a pretty bold font, but definitely a smaller size. So I'll put that in there. I do want it to be centered within the space, so I'm going to choose the centering option, and then I could sort of build this out. So if I end up adding more items, the text that's in there will all be centered. And it feels like it could align vertically just a little taller, but it's pretty close to where I'd want it to be. Okay, so I've got a variant there. Let's zoom out. And so we've got our normal bag right here, and then we'll have a variant of that is a different version. What I want to do is I'm going to be working with local variables, and if there's items in the bag, I actually want to see the number of items in the bag and also show this variant of it. But I'm ultimately going to create some variables that can determine that. So one of those variables will be for the number in the bag, and another one will be whether or not there's any content in the cart at all, because if there's no content in the cart, I don't want to show this other version of it. So let's set up some of those variables inside of Figma. I'm going to just zoom out on my design here and click to some sort of neutral area inside of my design. And what I want to do is set up some local variables. So you'll see here, right here on the right, if I don't have anything specific selected and I'm just clicked on a neutral area, I could add some local variables right here. So I'm going to click on the local variables option to open my variables. I don't have any yet. And so I'll create some variables. And what I want is to have a number variable. And the number, we can start it with a value of 0. We don't have any items in there. I can change the names of my variables, but I'm fine with it just saying number, and really it's going to be sort of number of items, if you will. If you wanted to change the name of it, you could do that. I might say number of items as my variable name. And then I'm going to go ahead and add a second one, and that's whether or not, oops, not a second mode. I actually wanted a second variable. So let's undo that mode. And instead I want to say create a new variable. And I want another variable, and in this case I wanted to have a numerical variable for, let's say, the price. And the price of our product right now is $3.95. This might be actually, instead of price, I might even say total. And then, the total would be 0 initially, but we would update it based on perhaps like the price that we're adding to the cart, for example. We could do that. I'll click here to add another variable. I'm going to this time add a Boolean variable. And the Boolean variable would either be on or off. And I'm going to go ahead and name that like in cart, or in bag or something like that, so that we know that there's content in the bag or in the cart. So that will be fine. It's going to start with false as part of that variable. Now that I've established these variables, we can apply them to particular areas. So for example, if I click on my component up here and we click on the text that's there, I want to get to that sort of text variable that's here. It's not a variable yet. It's actually just filled with the number 1. Instead of that, though, I can click on this option right here to apply a variable to that text. And so what I want to do is apply the variable called number of items, and the value of that is currently 0. So you'll see that that updated to 0 because the value of that variable is 0. If the value of that was 5, that item would update to 5, as you can see. And what we're going to be able to do is change the variable based on user behavior, and that's going to be really powerful. Now, this idea of whether or not it's in the bag or not is also important. And so when I have my variants that are up here, I'm going to go ahead and I can even close these variables, but I'm going to select these variants. And right now you'll see that I have one called default and the other variable is simply called variant 2. What I want to do is rename these and give them values that associate with the in-bag variable that's here. So basically true or false. So this first one is going to be named, this variant I'm going to call false. And then this other variant we're going to go ahead and call true. And so these are sort of the properties of our component right there. So it's property 1 right now, but I could even rename that. So I might call it sort of like in cart or something like that. And so based on whether or not we've got an instance of that. So what I'm going to do here is replace this bag with an instance of our component now. So instead of the bag, I'm going to go to the assets where I've got this, and it looks like it's being called, the asset itself seems to be being called local mall for some reason. I don't even remember naming it that, but there it is. And there's 2 variants to it. I might rename that to just bag as far as that goes. And so that the bag component, I want to go ahead and add that into my design. So I've got it here. What I could do is sort of copy that and then replace, so paste to replace, and I'll replace it with the component version of it now that I've copied it. So right there is now the component, and you can see that I've got this on like true and false option here. If I toggle that, it will toggle the number of items that are in the bag. So currently there's nothing in the bag, so it will toggle that as sort of appropriate here. But these are set to either being false or true, and that's also the names I gave to the local variables, right? So when you have a Boolean variable, it's either going to be false or true. And so we do want those to have the exact same names. In fact, I'm not sure if it's case sensitive. I want to make sure that I match what the values are right here. So in this case, they're represented in uppercase, and so I want to make sure that I match those. It may not be case sensitive, I'm not sure, but you want a correspondence between your value in order to make this work. So, okay, I've got that set up, and so I could toggle the true false part of that here if I needed one versus the other, but really what I want to do is toggle that when I click on the add to cart button. So I can start to do that now through prototyping. I can close my variables right now, and when I click on the add to cart, I'd like the bag to update with the number that's in there. And if I click multiple times, maybe I add more than one into the cart. So to do that, I'm going to select the cart. I'm going to go to my prototyping mode and we'll add an interaction for it. And when we tap on the bag button there, what I'm going to do is set a variable. So I'm going to choose set variable. And the variable I want to set is going to be that the number of items right here, that number of items is going to then change to the number of items plus 1. We're going to add items when we click on that. And so that's the first thing that I've got that will set that variable. And we can do more than one of those. I can add another thing to add a second action on tap. So I'll click plus again and we'll set another variable. And that variable is that the in bag here is going to become true at that point. So, so the expression I want is for the in bag to become true. And we'll set that variable to true. Okay, so we're updating our variables when we tap. We're setting these variables and sort of updating them. And then over here where we actually got the bag, the thing that I want to do here is click on that to assign it to a variable as well. Because right now I can toggle it on and off, but it's actually not assigned to variables. But I can click on that little assign variable button that's to the right of it, and then right here I can click the in bag as the assigned variable. And because the values there are identical to the true false for our component variants, then we can assign the true false values there, and when those update, it will update the component and actually go to the different component states. Let's go ahead and take a look at how that will work. When I present this, we can see if this is actually functioning. So when I click on the add to cart button, we should update the bag with the number that we're adding, and every time I add to the cart, you'll see that we're adding more and more items to the bag. Now, I don't even have the bag clickable, but we could certainly click on the bag to go to a checkout process, or when I click on the add to cart, we could navigate to a different screen or do an overlay for checkout, that kind of thing. So we could continue with this, but this is a persistent element. So provided that component is in other screens, that the number in the bag will remain true. All right, so let's say I wanted something that could remove items from the bag. Right now I can only add, but I can't remove. So let's explore that through maybe toggling a kind of checkout process for our content. And so I'm going to just start by just duplicating this frame that's here, and maybe this is going to be our checkout frame, and I could update it based on that. So I don't necessarily want all this other content in there. I could have, you know, small versions of the watch or something, or what it is we're buying, but I'm just gonna keep this simple and maybe I'll do this as an overlay instead. And so I think maybe instead of just, I was gonna steal some of this content and style, but I think what I'll do is just get rid of that, and instead I'll just make a new frame for our checkout process. And so that new frame, I do want it to have about the same size, at least maybe in the width as our content. So that was a width of 375. But we could do it as an overlay perhaps. And so I'll just make it like a 375 by 375 square. And this will be part of our kind of checkout process. So I'll call it the checkout frame. All right. Or, you know, this is maybe the sort of cart frame or something. I don't know. I'll just call it checkout for right now. Anyway, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a duplicate of the add to cart button. I'm going to bring it over here. And I actually want both the words and the button. So I'll bring that over, and we'll do a little overlay here where we could have a couple different options. And so one of them might be like continue shopping, you know, And then the other one will be like checkout now, something like that, or checkout now. So I'll have a couple just button options that will be there, and we can bring these down. And then what I might do is just have a little piece of text. So I'll say something like, I'll bring this over, Hamilton, and maybe we'll say Hamilton, and I could have a little picture of it or whatever, and maybe I'll do that as well. I'll find my photo and bring that over. I think maybe what I'll do is just pull a duplicate from here, and let's find that watch. It's that first one. What I want to do is take this and crop it. So double click here, getting into the crop marks. Oops, I'm tiling. Don't want that. I want to crop, and then just crop to the watch only. Okay, so I'll have like a little small version of this. And what I'll also do is create maybe some buttons that we could add and remove elements. So we'll have this, continue shopping, checkout now will be sort of an overlay option. But on top of this, I also want a couple buttons. So let's just build those out. I want sort of plus and minus buttons. We'll see if our text will work okay for that. So I'll have a minus, and let's see what our fonts are. So it's using my header font at the moment. I'm gonna probably detach it from that header font and make this bigger. I want like a sort of big version of that. I'll have a minus button here, and then over here I'll have a plus button. And in the middle, we could actually have the number. And so I'll start it at 0 as the number. That seems a little large for this, so I'm going to bring that down. Let's see, maybe about 36 for that. Okay, so we'll take all of these options, and you know, I'm not loving the look of this, but I don't want to belabor the point. What we're going to really do is have a number to this, and it's going to be this sort of number in our cart. And what we could also do is, you know, like update a price even, or something like that with some of these things. We could use price variables. So with this, I could add some interaction pieces to this. So this number right here, I actually want to make the variable. So I'm going to click on the apply variable, and that's going to be the number of items as the text variable that will go into there. So that content of there is actually going to be updated based on the number of items. This, it will be a little plus button, and so when we prototype that out, what I'd like to do is have a little interaction on tap that we set the variable for number of items, and what we're going to do is set the number of items to +1 when we click on that variable. And then if we're on the minus right here, we'll add a tap interaction on that as well. So I'm going to go ahead and click to the interaction on tap, and we'll set the variable of number of items. And in this case, we want number of items to reduce by 1, -1. So that we could add and reduce the number of items that are actually in our cart. All right, so with that, when I click on the add to cart in the prototype, here's what we'll do, is not only will we set the variables so that our bag updates, but in addition to that, what we'd like to do is add an addition where we open an overlay. And the overlay that we open is going to be the checkout frame that's here. And we could position that checkout frame as we want. And so I like to sort of manually position it. You can see that we could do that by bringing this up, kind of, you know, suggesting kind of where that's going to go inside of here. So it's going to, you know, maybe it will even overlay where the cart was. I don't know. Like, so we could figure out where we want it. But Perhaps it sort of overlays this other material that's there. I don't know. I might want this to look a little bit different. And for some reason, the image there didn't look like it was previewing. But what we want that to do, if we look at the interaction here, is to open that overlay. We could have that sort of dissolve in, perhaps, to have just a little animation of having that in, and we can close it when clicking outside, perhaps. That would be fine. All right, so let's try that out. If we go back to our flow, retest, now when we click on the Add to Cart button, not only should we update the variable, but we also will get our overlay. And I'm missing the image. For some reason that's not showing up. It's probably not in the frame correctly. And you'll see that it has the number 1. But what I should also be able to do is add more to the cart. So I could add additional ones, or I could subtract additional ones. One thing that might happen is when I get sort of too low here, it will just say 0 on the bag at that point. But it's still, when we're 0 on the bag, we probably would like it if the bag itself was empty. And I do need some ability to close that. So I can still add to the cart and up the number, reduce the number. So that's really powerful here with some of the capabilities that we have. All right, I want to come back to my design. I'll close this part out, figure out why the watch is not inside of there. And usually when it doesn't display, it's because it's outside of the frame. I can see that watch is right there. It's outside of the checkout frame. So I do want that within the frame itself. And I kind of feel like these buttons are a little bit too big. I'm gonna maybe select them and just scale them down a little bit. Maybe I take these and sort of center them, and I can't help but like mess with the design. So what I thought I might do is sort of change this with a little bit smaller frame so that the checkout overlay that's here is just a little bit smaller. I don't want to lose my interactions that are there, but I'm going to sort of move some of this content over. I'll select all of this stuff and just kind of shift it over to be just a little bit smaller so that the overlay actually is going to just get a little bit smaller for this. So I got to figure out kind of the right position of that. And certainly this background could be, you know, the background on the design itself, the layer could be maybe a little bit transparent, so it sort of overlays, but we see just a little bit about what's behind it. If we wanted to, we could do that. I think I'll keep it at 100%, but I am going to take the content and decide to stroke it, I think, and give like a little stroke on the outside, maybe a 2-pixel stroke, and round the corners of it off, I think. So I want to just to look a little bit differently, and so we'll round the corners. You'll notice that there's a variable option. Even things like corner radius could be a variable, which is interesting. Like changing, you know, you can do color variables and other stuff. So local variables inside of Figma are pretty powerful that way, but I've got a few other options just to make this a little bit better. Let's take a look at what that looks like, and I want to fix one other bit of functionality here. So if I add to the cart, we can see that that will change. This isn't quite in the right location now, but I can add on, I can do that. And if I clicked on the checkout from here, I could go to a checkout process. If I clicked on continue shopping, we could certainly make that I see that it's upping the number, and that's because I duplicated the add to cart, so some of that same functionality is on there. I need to go and change some of the prototypes here where continue shopping is not doing that. So continue shopping really should just bring us back to our screen. So what I'm going to do is change that, get rid of the set variable part, which came over when I copied that. So I'll get rid of that, and instead what we'll do is we'll just close the overlay if it was continue shopping. All right, so one of the things I don't like is that when we actually click on this and open the overlay is now in the wrong position, so we can manually position it. So what I want to do is make sure that it's kind of where I want it. So I'm going to go ahead, once you add the cart, I'll sort of put it kind of right there. I certainly don't really need the word Hamilton twice when we do that, but I want this maybe into some sort of natural position where that might pop up. I don't love the look of it, but you get the idea. And so the other thing I wanted to do here is fix the behavior that when we go to 0 in the cart. So if I add to the cart, that's great. It will add in, it will say 1 right there. If I continue shopping, the 1 stays. If I add more to the cart, it continues to update that. I can subtract from it. But what if I end up subtracting back to 0? I'd like my cart to reset at that point. So what we could do is take a look at that. So let's say we had this number and we're setting these variables. Well, what we could do is say, okay, not only will we set that variable, but what we'll do is we'll set another variable. And the variable that we want to set is really like a conditional. So I'm going to go ahead and say that I want this as a conditional. And so now we got to write the condition. So the condition here is that if the number of items is less than 1, then that's the if condition. Now, once that's true, what we're going to do is we're going to add an action to set the variable called inBag, and what we want to make it go to then false. Because once we have less than 1 item, in other words, once there's 0 items in the bag, there's nothing in the bag, and we'll set that to false. So that is setting conditionals in this case. We'll set the number of items to -1. That will happen first. Then it will check the conditional and see if we're back at 0. And then what we'll do is we'll set the bag back to having nothing in it. Okay, with those interactions done, let's go ahead and check that functionality. I can click to add to cart. We can add to the cart, add more items. And now if I go from 1 to 0, you'll see that the cart itself has nothing in it now. We've got 0 in the cart, and then the bag itself really has nothing in it anymore because we removed that item. So we can add conditionals to our variables that make this even more powerful and flexible. As you can see, I can remove this, and we've updated our bag accordingly. Pretty cool functionality with local variables inside of Figma. I hope you learned a thing or two about working with variables in Figma and have some ideas for your own workflow if you're building out an app or website prototype.